All right.
This meeting is called to order. This is the March 10th meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Could I have a motion to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants? Okay.
Second.
I have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of February 25th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Anybody have any announcements this evening? I have one. I just wanted to note that March 5th was the 45th anniversary of the death of Officer Lonchitis back in 1975. When he was shot answering a call. And I just wanted to note that because sometimes people forget that being a policeman, even here in Shrewsbury, where we think not a lot happens, is a dangerous job. And I just want to offer our sympathies, continued sympathies to the family. That was quite a shock to the community. His son actually became a police officer, and he's a lieutenant now. Yep. In our police department, so a little bit of irony there, but I just wanted to make note of that and recognize him. Anybody else have anything? No? Okay. Mr. Mizuka, do you have anything that you'd like to report on?
I do. A couple quick things, if I may. Just wanted to remind everyone out there that's listening that there's still several seats in almost every precinct that we need to fill for town meeting. So not enough interest so far. Hopefully you can talk to folks and get people excited to come out and participate in the legislative process in town and try to get everyone on the ballot and make it easier instead of having to do write-ins. So we encourage you to come into the town's clerk's office if you're interested. Second, earlier today, I advised staff about some activities that we have been reviewing and participating in with regards to COVID-19, the coronavirus. Earlier this week, yesterday, we participated in a meeting with the Central Mass Regional Public Health Alliance. We learned more about the implications of the disease and what we can do within town operations and town buildings to help mitigate its impacts. And earlier today, we heard Governor Baker announce that a state of emergency is in place. At this point in time, town operations are moving forward under normal conditions. We have asked staff to not come to work if they are sick with a fever and have a cough or other respiratory symptoms, and we would ask for the public's participation in that as well and coming into the town buildings. Certainly, if there's an emergency medical situation that requires our assistance through a 911 call, we are able and will respond, and our first responders have the appropriate equipment that they need to use in those situations. We will continue to keep the public apprised of any changes that we would make in town operations, although none are foreseen at least at this time, but this is obviously a rapidly progressing thing. As we've informed staff, I'll inform the public that the CDC's website and its pages related to the coronavirus are the best resource that anyone can use with regards to employers' situation and individual health and conditions during this situation. So I encourage you to go to cdc.gov and access their information. And I will continue to keep the board and the public apprised of the town's response to this at each meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a 7:05 public hearing with Maxim Sirica on Wheels, Inc. For an application at 421 Boston Turnpike for a Class 2 license. Hours of operation Monday through Friday, 10 to 5 p.m., and Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Anybody here from On Wheels? Yes? Would you like to come forward? Hi. Over here. You can sit at the table now.
Okay.
Okay. Evening. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my neighborhood, this place cut my trees.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you the applicant?
No,
Oh, sorry, we gotta have the applicant
Neighborhood.
first.
I'm
You're in the butter?
yes,
Okay,
the neighborhood.
first we have to hear from the applicant.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought you were coming up because you were the
Okay.
applicant. Is there anybody here representing On Wheels? No, okay. Why don't we just continue this till later in the meeting and see if the person shows up? Okay. Okay, we're gonna wait to see if the gentleman shows up. So we're not gonna do anything right now. We're gonna just adjourn the hearing for a few minutes, see if he shows up, and we'll let you know. Okay. We're a little bit early for a 7:10 meeting with Community Preservation Shrewsbury, but it's not a public hearing, so we can start. Is anybody here who's going to make the presentation? Would you like to come forward? Jason, you know how to use that by now, right?
Been in this chair for a few times now, yep. So thank you all for this evening, and it's time to speak before you about the Community Preservation Act, as I get my papers here in order. So both Melanie McGee and myself are members of the Community Preservation Shrewsbury Ballot Committee, which was formed in November of last year, and our explicit goal is to have the Community Preservation Act adopted in Shrewsbury. So, sorry, as I get myself right here. Community Preservation Act, I advance the slide here. Just a little bit about us before we get into the actual question about what CPA is. The ballot committee was formed out of folks that are residents, that are volunteers, and that we're also property taxpayers in Shrewsbury. We see the potential for bringing CPA to Shrewsbury, filling in gaps in funding where there'd be community enriching and quality of life projects brought to town. We formed a ballot committee, like I said earlier, to advocate adoption of CPA. With us, to part of the committee is Missy Hollenbeck, Melanie McGee, Gail Aslanian, Kathy McSweeney, Paul Schwab, and members that could not make it tonight are Martha Gatch and Barbara Kickham. So what is CPA? CPA was a law enacted in 2000 by Governor Cellucci. It was adopted so far to date by 176 towns and cities across the Commonwealth. Notably Grafton, Northborough, and West Boylston have adopted it. It establishes dedicated funding for open space and recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing. Now, these categories are hard to fund given that they're competing normally with other core town services. So if you can imagine, as you're going through the budget season now, and you have departments that are like the school department, which is facing a huge budget gap, you'd be pretty hard pressed that for any either board or committee or external group that wants to see projects come before the town for open space recreation, historic preservation, or affordable housing, to have to butt up against that education department gap fall or any other shortfall in town. So the beauty of the Community Preservation Act is because other communities around the Commonwealth have had the same similar problem, leading right up to being enacted in 2000 to say, all right, there's no way we're going to be able to get funding when priority core services are rightfully funded or attempted to be funded in whole or part, but these other projects don't get any airtime, don't see any funding. So CPA came out of that growing need to do something about it. So the funds are dedicated for those specific projects. They live side by side with the municipal budget, so it doesn't compete with other court services. It doesn't compete with building projects. So this definitely allows, the beauty of it is it allows for these other quality of life and important projects in town to also see some daylight and get some traction. So the community preservation monies are raised to a locally added surcharge on the real estate tax bills of not more than 3%, and that's what's allowed by the statute. I'll get into later on slides about what we're proposing here in Shrewsbury. Communities that adopt CPA receive a variable match distribution from the statewide Community Preservation Trust Fund. Again, I'll cover that in following slides. And if I ask, well, why now, with so many things going on in our town, with other fees that have been tacked on, why is the time now? And quite frankly, one of the biggest drivers in this is that the state funds that have been out there distributing every year to CPA adopted communities have been untapped by Shrewsbury, and I think we're really leaving money on the table. And also beyond that, from our ballot committee perspective, we've learned through data, through the coalition, that drives CPA adoption across the Commonwealth, that they've learned when you put a ballot question about CPA in a presidential election year, you'll get a really high turnout and you'll get a really high success rate. So we certainly want to see it succeed, and so that's why we're timing it for this election cycle. So I understand that, from talking to some of the selectmen, that CPA had been thought about when it first came out back in 2001. And so I wanted to just highlight some of the key amendments that come across that I'm hoping that you would see favorable in these years of change. In 2004, the CPA amendments included adding that you can appropriate funds to the Affordable Housing Trust, which is another way to get us affordable housing in our community. In 2006, the word acquisition was added to community housing as a allowable use. In 2012, very big year of changes. They added the $100,000 exemption for commercial and industrial properties, and also added the flexibility for those recreational projects. Prior to this, you could not fund recreational projects from using CPA funds if that land was not created through CPA itself. So this amendment allows for existing playgrounds, parks to be renovated for capital projects using CPA funds. And then last year, most importantly, there was a recognized need to stand up the statewide Community Preservation Fund. You can imagine that when you talk about free money from the state, a lot of communities have dumped in, like I said earlier, 176 communities, and they've all tapped into that same trust fund. So over time, the allotments from the state have gone down because of the distribution has gone wider. So with the pent-up demand, say, hey, you really got to stand up this trust fund, the Baker and Polito administration had fixed the problem by increasing the fees at the Registry of Deeds, which is how this statewide trust fund gets funded. I'll cover that a little more detail later in the presentation. So what can CPA fund? What you see on screen is a simplified view of the matrix about what you can do on the left-hand side, which is acquire, create, preserve, support, or rehabilitate and restore, and across the funding categories of open space, recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing. You can see most of them say yes and a few no's there. Obviously, you cannot create historical preservation, right? It has to actually mature and become something of historic nature. Added into your packets available to you is a legalized version of what this chart looks like, so you can see the full text on that. So from here, I'm going to go through some specific town highlights, what other CPA adopted towns have done with their CPA funds. And I won't drain these slides, but certainly just call some highlights. In Northborough, what they've done there was, and if you drive down Main Street, you'll clearly see CPA in action. You'll see a town common was created. Now, that's certainly unheard of these days, right? You can't really create a town common using in these days unless you raise the properties and actually make that space. Well, they did it with $480,000 of CPA funds. They also decided in their community that they wanted to preserve White Cliffs, which is a historic property for their needs, right? Now, of course, every community has their own treasures, and every community decides what's important to them. For Northborough, it was their important piece of property to preserve and protect for future use. That was at $2.4 million. Affordable housing, another favorite, right on Main Street, okay? So if you know where the church is, right diagonally from that church is a white building that's got 4 pillars in Main Street, okay? That building was historic, and with the partnership of Habitat Humanity, they converted that historic building into affordable housing units, thus creating a 2-for-1 special. You get historic building preservation, and you also have affordable housing was added as well. Grafton. So there, for open space, they've acquired some space for future use of for just to have preserve open space and passive recreation. They've also made a number of improvements at their beach, which was adding sand, grills, canopy, and improved handicap accessibility for $54,000. Historic preservation in that regard, they had an inventory for historical and cultural resources. That was $15,000 for CPA and $15,000 from a grant, and also did more affordable housing in that space for $171,000. If you look at Holliston, so just getting a little wider in our range here. Open space. So they had created parking for their existing conservation areas. So you can use, it doesn't have to be green space. It could be extending the use of your green spaces that you have today. So let's say there's a green space today. Think of Camp One again, right? If there is any expansion of that the parking space, or to make that walkable and accessible, you can certainly do that with CPA funds. My favorite here, looking at tennis courts in Holliston, they had to do drainage mitigation, regrading, and reconstruction of 4 tennis courts, resurfacing of the basketball court, replacement of backboards, upgrading existing lighting fixtures, and installation of 4 new poles and light fixtures. There are $255,000 of CPA money, and then $45,000 from other sources. Town record preservation, they also preserved their historical records for $28,000. Typically, that's through digitization, or also making sure that their documents, their books don't degrade by putting them in safes that are airtight, et cetera. More affordable housing in that space as well in Holliston. And finally, for my town highlights, Canton. There, they had funds for compensating a nonprofit organization for expenses associated with holding a required conservation restriction. So if you imagine open space, if we do adopt CPA and we purchase properties, lots for open space, a conservation restriction would have to be placed on those spaces per CPA guidelines. So you have to obviously have the CR with another entity. It can't be held by the town. And just wrapping up on the examples here, historic preservation, you can see that they've also maintained their gravestones in the old cemetery there for $36,000. And again, more affordable housing, replacing siding to support their existing housing stock. So then we ask, well, why do we need CPA in Shrewsbury? Do we have everything we need right now? And our answer is no. I think we do need CPA because we're not funding the aspects that I'm going to be covering now as for examples. We all know that water is a very sensitive topic in town, and there is opportunities here to use CPA funds to purchase and acquire lands as they become available for protecting them for our future water and existing water well fields. So, there was some lands that came available. Worcester Sand and Gravel is vacating that space, turned it over to another company. Had CPA been in place, and had it been an opportunity for the town to purchase that property, that could have been something that would have been a great opportunity to save and protect our water well fields. Next is substantial unfunded recreation capital budgets backlog. A lot to be said there, but you can say, it's hard to say we can fund these recreational projects when you have, budget gap falls in places like the education department, et cetera. But just to give you some examples there, municipal dry field improvements are estimated to be at $700,000. Upper Dean Park basketball lighting, $350,000. Lake Street park improvements, over $1 million worth of projects to be done, adding new fields, irrigation, wells, and parking improvements. Repairs to historic headstones, $50,000. These are all rough estimates. And recent projects that could have been funded through CPA. Repairs to Civil War Monument at Town Common for $14,000. Herbicide treatment at Lake Quinsigamon for $47,000. And Dean Park bandstand roof repairs of $10,000. You know, I throw all these numbers out here. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And can you imagine saying, well, if let's say school department has a shortfall of $800,000, you're not going to get $800,000 for basketball lighting, historic headstones, repairs, and fixing, the basketball and improving our fields at Municipal Drive. It's not going to happen under the municipal budget. It's just never going to happen, right? Because you don't have the funds, right? So if we look at other examples of why we need CPA in Shrewsbury, another item in here which is hot on some folks' minds is the historic homes are vanishing from our town landscape. Now, we just had the Allen House come as a town-owned property and then auctioned off. So we hear that the house has been slated for demolition. And there are some folks in town that they look at that and say, that's a wasted opportunity, where we could have had, if we had CPA in place, we could have kept that, preserved it, and like Northborough did, converted it to affordable housing. Now, of course, it's, as a property owner, it may be too much of a tall ask to do something with that property. But that's why CPA was an opportunity to say, okay, it's still something important to our community. Let's use that to fund that effort. Keep that property in our town. Because once these properties are gone, they're not coming back. And we can be talking about having town center rezoning and having, I would say, faux-looking historic buildings. But why don't we keep the buildings that are actually historic in our midst before we tear them down and replace them with something that is not the real thing. And just one more thing on that topic, as an opportunity as well. Part of that tool chest, right? CPA is one of these large tools you can use. I would also argue that demolition bylaw is another opportunity to give some time to allow CPA to work, right? To actually say, okay, if this building was slated, it wasn't part of the town's inventory, but it was really in the property owner's hands, to keep that property from being demolished so quickly, so that you can use CPA funds to benefit in our community. And then wrapping up on this slide here, I won't go into the actual examples, but there are, if you go back into the 2001 master plan, 2016 master plan, the 2012 and 2019 housing production plans, all those documents have clear language about Community Preservation Act, recommending it in some form or manner, whether it be for the historical side of the house, open space and recreation, or affordable housing. And so if need be, I can reference those points if you'd like after this meeting. So to date, we've reached out to several boards and commissions, interest groups, and other town governments that have adopted CPA. In bold are the 5 departments that are direct stakeholders to CPA adoption, because they will be required statutorily to provide a representative from their boards onto a future committee that would be overseeing CPA. That would be Conservation Commission, Historic Commission, Housing Authority, Parks and Cemetery Commission, and the Planning Board. We've also talked to the Commission on Council of Aging, Lake Quinsigamon Commission, Historic District Commission, and Trails Committee from town. And then we had a number of interest groups, as you see on screen, including PTOs, Republican and Democratic town committees, Rotary Club, Historic Society, Lake Quinsigamon Watershed Association. And we also reached out to contacts from Northborough, namely the CPC chairperson, a person who is responsible for overseeing CPA funds in Northborough, the town planner for Northborough, and the Affordable Housing Corporation contact for Northborough. And then lastly, the Grafton Town Administrator. All these entities, all these groups that we've talked to date, at least expressing to us positive or just an open mind to CPA adoption. I encouraged each of those groups to reach out to the Board of Selectmen, to town meeting members. Certainly, if there's any concerns that they've expressed to you, which I'm not privy to, certainly would love to hear that concern tonight, if that was available. Okay. So getting into the proposal. Community Preservation Shrewsbury, which is the ballot committee, is proposing that Shrewsbury opt in by adopting CPA with a conservative surcharge of 1% of the real estate tax bill, including allowable exemptions that I'll cover in the next few slides. And if you remember from my opening remarks, 3% was the max that you can charge for CPA. We're looking for a conservative 1%. And this would have to go before a ballot referendum, has to actually go to town meeting for approval and then go to the ballot referendum to get it adopted. A community could hold another referendum in the future if there was a request to increase or decrease a surcharge, to change the exemptions, or to revoke adoption. Now, thankfully, to date, 176 communities have adopted it, 0 have revoked it. So that is definitely a telltale sign that communities get them and they don't want to remove it. So what does it look like from the cost to property owners? So if you look at the top table there, you can see that smack in the middle there, this average single-family property value at $478,603 translates to an annual surcharge of $47.21. And so that breaks down to $12 a quarter in those payments. For $12 a quarter, you can be funding all those projects that I just discussed earlier, which is the benefit of CPA. Your $12 goes a long way for the average single-family property value. So who's exempt? 100% of the surcharge exemption will be in place for low-income property owners and low to moderate-income senior property owners. And then lastly, for all residential properties, all commercial, all industrial properties, the first $100,000 of taxable property value is automatically deducted for the purposes of calculating the CPA surcharge. The idea here is that the $100,000 right off the top is so that the lowest property values are impacted the least, if at all. So certainly if you're in a $200,000 valued home and you're a low-income property owner, you're not seeing a surcharge at all. Or if you are making over the every median income, you're still charged a very small amount if your property value is very low. And that is the purpose of the exemptions that we were looking to ride along with this 1%. So what does that mean in terms of, if we look at other choices, why 1%? You can see on the table, the chart there, that 1% is translating to $47. If we decided to go up, we would start talking about $70, $90, $94, $141 for the average taxpayer. Certainly, if your home is valued much higher than the average home, that is a tall order, and we didn't want to see that burden placed on our community. We wanted to see, let's step into CPA. Let's see, how the community appetite is for the projects then, and be up to the community in the future if they wanted to adjust the rate. And then we thought that going below 1% was just too small to make this worth it. So you can see there at $23 for the year, but that's only going to be raising about $286,000 at that low end. So in terms of forecasting here, the local CPA surcharge receipts projected are based on 2016 property values, which we found on the Shrewsbury, the government website for this. And then I took that and multiplied it by the 2020 tax rate to get the values you see on screen here. If we want to get the most accurate projections on this, and if we want to move forward with CPA, we certainly would like to work with the town assessor to get the most up-to-date valuations for homes, and then we do the same calculation like that here. It's very straight math to get this information. And we also reached out to the Community Preservation Coalition. That's a separate entity that looks at promoting CPA throughout the Commonwealth, and they projected our income for this receipts at just shy of $600,000. For the purposes of our communication out to the community and for presentation going forward here tonight, we're estimating about $500,000 or greater income on this. Given that there's going to be variability to say who's actually going to be taking advantage of those exclusions on the low income and low to moderate income senior exemptions. And then if we compare against what does it look like across the towns, you can see Shrewsbury there with a 12.47 tax rate, and other towns that I've seen, other town documents compare us to, that 1% is also in line with some of our other neighboring communities that we compare ourselves to. Some have adopted at 1.5, and some even at 3%. But you can definitely see that the valuations of those homes are either much lower or much higher, which will drive why they've gone to even 1.5 or 3%. It all depends on their tax base as well. So we're not leading the pack with 3, and we're not behind. 1%, it seems to be a very favorable amount across towns. So now, in summary about the revenues from CPA, with 1%, we're looking at $500,000, and that doesn't include yet the CPA monies from the state. So if we adopt CPA, and if we adopted last year, we would have received, as a 1% community, surcharge community, a 23.9% return on our investment. So at $500,000, we would have had $120,000 received from the state. Now, I would say that if a community decided to go up to 3%, that they would have received the 3 rounds of funding distributions from the state. But at 1%, we would have only benefited from the first round at 23.9%. A community should know that we, as property owners, have actually been paying into the state fund since adoption of CPA at the state level in 2000. Every time you have a transaction in the Registry of Deeds, there's a surcharge built in there that takes that money and puts into the trust fund. And only communities that have adopted CPA can receive benefit back from that trust fund. So by adopting CPA, we're finally able to tap into monies that we've been putting into the fund to receive back for our community's benefit. We're almost there. What is the approval process? So the projects that are raised through CPA are controlled by a Community Preservation Committee, which is proposed to be a 9-member board. There are 5 statutory members, which I've discussed earlier, but there'll be 4 others that we are proposing to add on, optional at-large members. The makeup of the CPC would actually be done, we're proposing to have it done after adoption to see if the community wants to do that. And I'll have, on the following slide, I'll talk about the timeline about what comes next. Project requests are submitted to CPC for review, and then the CPC will accept those projects, will review and accept those projects, and to present them to town meeting. And then town meeting, as the body to approve projects, will take that up. And then projects, there must be at least a 10% allocation of funds, either allocated or spent annually for each of the categories, for open space and recreation combined, historic preservation, or affordable housing. Each of those categories, again, have to be allocated or spent annually. Now, in terms of timeline, so far you can see that we've formed the ballot committee in November. From January through April, we've been having our meetings with stakeholders, interest groups. Tonight is where we're looking and hoping for the Board of Selectmen to adopt a warrant article to see if we would adopt CPA in Shrewsbury. And then moving forward from here, we have a couple of public meetings in the library between March and April. May's town meeting to adopt CPA by town meeting. And then from June to November will be the townwide public campaign. Finally, the election ballot question in November. Thereafter, from November through May will be the time frame for raising and acting on a bylaw that would establish the CPC, and then CPA would go into effect on July 1st, 2021. And that is the timeline that we're working with. So for next steps. Tonight, the ballot committee is requesting this board to raise a warrant article seeking adoption of CPA as proposed for the annual town meeting in 2020. And followed by that is, just as informative to the community, is that the ballot committee will be hosting 2 public meetings at the library. Knock on wood, hopefully we'll be able to still meet in the library, both on March 18th from 7 p.m. to 8:45, and then on Saturday, April 18th from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Information is posted on our website and on our Facebook page as well. If we cannot have these public meetings, we will certainly look to have webinars or other ways to communicate our message about CPA to town meeting members, as that will be the next body to act on this. And then lastly, just a slide to leave up, if there's any questions, while folks are looking to see how they can support CPA in the weeks and months ahead.
Okay,
Thank you for your time.
thank you. Questions, comments from members of the board?
I have some questions.
Sure.
First of all, thank you for all the time that you and other members have put into the effort going to a variety of appointed and elected boards and making sure people understood what your position was versus what some have represented it as being, and your dollar figures and your impacts. I have a couple of, I'm sorry, Mo?
Sure.
Oh, I thought you waved me off or something. I misread a hand gesture, I apologize.
Sorry.
Just to review one thing, today, an idea goes to town meeting, it gets vetted, town meeting then votes up and down, the money's appropriated. As I understand this, though there's a vetting process done by the CPA group, it then goes to town meeting as their recommendation, same process is followed. Why not just bring forth specific ideas for specific purposes and not bother with this? Several years ago, people thought open space in town was disappearing. It was a specific bond issue brought to town meeting. It was approved. Then it was approved, I believe, at the ballot, and open space was acquired. Last year, this board brought a specific appropriation to town meeting, asking that an actual inventory of historically significant structures be taken. Town meeting approved that. One of the things I've observed in this town is that when you go to people with a specific request for a specific deliverable, there seems to be a willingness to allocate money and support money in a general operating budget, or in several cases, support a new building, support an operational override several years ago, and it was very specific and very targeted. A concern I have about this is that it's rather nebulous. There's a bunch of great ideas. I think for every great idea offered by one side, such as White Cliffs, this year they sunk more money into the roof, and the building is just sitting there. I would encourage you to, not asking you to do, but I'm just offering up one of the things that I think is a textbook case of why towns should avoid falling into the attractiveness of becoming the owner of a historic property. Can be spelled out quite clearly by the history of the Hosmer House in Sudbury Center. I don't know how many gazillions of dollars have gone into that house repeatedly as one use after another. I think it's a textbook study on the other side of what happens when something isn't specific and really a tight proposal. So I would offer those observations that in this town, in my opinion, the high degree of specificity, you're asking for X to buy Y, people will follow for that. I think there's a leeriness for something as nebulous as this proposal can be. Furthermore, I would just ask you folks respectfully to not go to the ballot this year, because we have to deal with the police station. And as you know from being a member of town meeting, last year monies were approved to evaluate the police station. A study is underway whether it should be a renovation add-on, or a new building. Either which way, the target is to go to town meeting and to then go to the ballot with the voters with this in November. And I will tell you, as a strong proponent of the police station and a strong proponent of open space and a variety of the other projects that you're touching on, I fear that it will kill the police station. Whereas I think specific actions can deal with your specific concerns. For example, I'm sure all of us have our own file of property in town that's under chapter status at this point, so that should it go forward and be sold, and the town has a chance to buy it, I know whether I'm on this board or off, I will seek the town's support to go in and buy a certain farm on Walnut Street and a variety of other properties in town that are under chapter status, because I think long-term they're good buys for the town. They're also something that can be very well defined. So I would ask you to take that into consideration, please, as you move forward. But I do genuinely thank you for your level of commitment and your involvement going around to the various groups and making sure that everyone heard the same story from the proponents. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. LeBeau?
I'd just like to hear a little bit more about the process to accept. So can you start prior to town meeting? What are the paths to get on the warrant? Just take me right up to the election and you're suggesting in November.
Sure, may I just go back to the slides? Yeah. So if you look at the timeline, I think that, sorry, it looks like the projection doesn't, there's an arrow there, you can see it on the laptop there. Basically, we're looking at, tonight we're seeking the warrant article. That warrant article will bring us to town meeting. Town meeting will be, if you look at the warrant writing, hopefully that was translated and I brought forth the warrant language for this. So the warrant article says, will the town accept chapters such and such to adopt CPA, right? So that brings it into an accepted list, and then it doesn't get actually effective until a ballot referendum is had, and the ballot referendum is triggered by acceptance by the town through town meeting. It will go on the next municipal or state election. It wouldn't be the primary, it has to be the actual general election. So if we were bringing this question a different time frame, yes, it can fall into a municipal election or another state election, let's say, 2 years from now. Again, I would offer that as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, that we're timing it specifically now because of the presidential and the success that we would have if we bring it forth at that time. So that's why the timing is that.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chairman? Sure. So to help me understand, what are the various options? Do you have only one option to get it onto the town meeting warrant? Or what are your?
No,
I haven't
those,
heard that, so-
right, there are other options. There's always a happy path, and there's also other alternatives, not so happy paths. So certainly, the happy path is the Board of Selectmen raises the warrant, brings it forward. Should that not happen tonight, our ballot committee is prepared to advance a citizen's petition. We would hope that the Board of Selectmen, you guys would actually see value in CPA and raise it yourselves, and obviously, as a joint effort, we would bring it forward. Like I said, we would bring a citizen petition. If by happenstance, the town meeting actually said no to this question, the opportunity is there, although we have to caucus amongst our group to see if whether we would take this on, which is a state ballot question petition, which is a tall order to get a lot of signatures from town to get that advanced. Some of us are crazy enough to do that, so I think we would do that if that was something that the majority wants to do. But again, that's not the happy path, so that's why we don't bring those aspects up.
So the so-called other happy paths would be a petition article to town meeting, and should town meeting, however it got on a town meeting warrant, not support, there could be the option of a petition article to go directly to the ballot.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Mr. Simon?
So, one thing, I first appreciate all the time and effort they've had, as well as the opportunity to meet with Mr. Marlena to go through the CPA. This was a question, actually, last election season that I was asked as well. And my opinion hasn't changed. As to value, I see absolute value here between open space, affordable housing. We saw with the housing production plan, particularly with 25 to 34-year-olds. We had a migration out of the community. That is the lifeblood of the community. Historical preservation, there are 12,800 projects under CPA, I think 176 communities. My challenge now is timing. I said that in April, and I believe it now. Together with Beal hitting the tax rolls, the police station, the stormwater utility fee, as well as candidly the challenge that we're seeing in this budget cycle, as well as projecting out. That is what I see as the sort of immediate challenge that we need to solve. I don't see this as something that forever would not be in my horizon, but I'd like to see as well a strategic plan for our community that would integrate concepts here as opposed to doing a CPA now. So for me, it's a matter of timing, not the value behind it, but for me, it's a couple years away.
Thank you. Mrs. Casfield?
I'd like to thank you for the work that you've done, you and your committee. I've had the opportunity to hear the presentation as a member of the Shrewsbury Rotary Club. I also had the opportunity to sit down with you, and I appreciate that you reached out to each member of the Board of Selectmen and took that time to talk one-on-one. Your presentation is very clear, very well done. You've done your homework. I think you've done great outreach. I echo the sentiments of my colleague, Mr. Samia. I don't want you to misconstrue my inability to support putting this on the ballot as a selectman with my not seeing value in what CPA can provide for the community. I absolutely see the value. And since we spoke, I've done quite a bit of thinking about CPA, and with every fiber of my being, want to be able to support putting an article on the warrant. What's stopping me is, first and foremost, the commitment that I have made to seeing through a police station and making sure that that is something that goes before the voters on the November 2020 ballot for the exact same reasons that you want to be on the ballot on November 2020, because the electorate is already coming out. So a lot of the effort that goes into, as we both know, because we've worked on so many initiatives together, the effort to go pull your voters out is greatly reduced when they already have a reason to come out. So for that reason alone, I'm wary that if we put both things on the 2020 November ballot, I'm not convinced that voters are going to first reach into one pocket and say yes to CPA, but then be able to reach into the other pocket and then say yes to the police station. And so I need to prioritize which, while I would like to see them both, which one has to go first. And to me, Shrewsbury is always a community that does things in order, and the police station is the next thing in line, and the next thing that I have to stay true to as far as where I'm going to put my support. I disagree that the citizens petition in this instance is an unhappy way to go, because I don't see this as friction. I see it as you have organized your committee, you have gone and done the outreach, you have built support, and if the answer that you get here tonight doesn't get you on the path that you want to be on, I don't feel any friction with that. While I'm not saying that I could never support CPA, that's certainly not what I'm saying. I just can't right now. I think about the time that I've spent on the board, and I think about raising the water rates. Even though stormwater fees were put in place by the sewer commissioners, I still feel responsibility for that cost being placed on the taxpayer. We just recently went through an adjustment to the rate of the trash bags. That caused a lot of discomfort, having to ask again, and that's much less than what CPA would be asking for the taxpayer. So I have to think about that impact to the taxpayer, and if I'm going to ask them for something, it has to be the police station right now. So again, I commend you for the work you're doing. If you take that citizens petition route, I don't see that as friction between the Board of Selectmen or myself and your committee. And I wouldn't stand in the way of what you're doing, of course. That's just how I feel about it right now.
I appreciate your sentiments, and thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure.
May I just address some of the
Sure.
remarks? So in terms of why not go through the municipal budget, right? Why not just go through the normal budgetary path? Plain and simple, I think that you're not going to get a discount if you go through the municipal path. Right? You're not going to get what I call a discount, because you get the state funds, the trust fund, to actually give money back to you, right? You're not going to get that 23.9% last year, or where they're projecting to be 30% discount going forward. So that's how I see it. I see it as that the state gives you that discount. Go one lane, you pay for 100%. Go another lane, you're paying, or you can say 70%, right, for those projects. Number two, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, you are competing with the big rocks in town. Again, school department, fire and safety, infrastructure. You're not going to be able to push through. I cannot imagine. I actually would actually not have you, ask you for you to go through, say, should we fund stadium lighting? I mean, sorry, not parks lighting in favor in doing that instead of funding teachers at the middle school, right? Why do that, right? You're not going to see those projects be seen through, because we know that overall we have a structural funding problem here about the municipal side of the budget, right? You're living it right now as you go through the budget process, right? And negotiating to see who's going to lose out, which department is going to lose out, right? You have to pick winners and losers, and someone's not going to be happy. So why, through all that mist, are you going to be able to have any of these projects ever funded? And I totally understand your positions in terms of you've made a commitment to the police station, and I commend that. And I heard it before, and I knew that. I knew that was the next thing. But I also see it as, look at that list of why we need CPA in Shrewsbury, and I say, well, if we don't do it now, when are we ever going to get to this? Because the structural funding problems are not going to just go away by themselves. You basically have to go to the State House and say, hey, let's get rid of 2.5, Prop 2.5. Or some other funding mechanism has to come in, and CPA is another funding mechanism. So that's the way we see this opportunity. Here's a way that statute is already allowed, it's matured, it's well thought through, it's been around since 2000, and half the state has already adopted this. So I understand the position you're in, and it sounds from the sentiment that we'll be going through a citizen's petition, and we'll have town meeting make a decision on that. But certainly, I would offer to you, these needs don't go away. And if it's not now, when? And in terms of strategic planning, the master plan and the housing production plans, going back from 2001, calling for CPA. I mean, that's a lot of time for planning. I don't know how much more time do we need to plan. I think the writing is on the wall already from the community, what they've been asking for, and we just need to enable it. And CPA is one of the many methods to be able to enable some of these projects to move forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. First, let me say, you made an excellent presentation. You guys did a lot of work. We told you a bunch of stuff that we thought we would need to have before we had a discussion, and you got pretty much all of it. So I commend you for your work. I think you've done a great presentation. I sat in on the one at the planning board. I think you did a good job at that. And I've heard positive things about the presentation from various people in the community. I have a couple of questions. Or maybe it's a comment question. It seems to me that the reason that now was chosen to bring this forward is because there's a presidential election. That's what the driving thing is. Is that fair?
It is fair. It's one. I mean, it is one of the two reasons to do it. Yep.
Okay. And I understand why you did it, because I was on that webinar or whatever that thing was that we listened to online. And I understand that the chance of success is a lot higher at that point. I do just want to bring up a couple of points, though, that you brought up. The Worcester Sand and Gravel property, I'm not sure what you were talking about buying, but there's no way the town was going to come up with $7 million. It would take 15 years to get enough money through CPA just to buy that property. But I will tell you that we are concerned about protecting the water supply. There are going to be 2 articles on the May warrant to buy 2 pieces of property that are in the area of the wells. And we've already had discussions with the new property owners about securing property to protect the wells. So I guess my point is, there's more than one way to do this. I know what you're suggesting is one way, but there are other opportunities that come up. And I do have to say that I understand the concern about the Allen Funeral Home. I'm not sure that CPA would have stopped that. I'm not even sure a demolition delay would have stopped it. It might have delayed it, but I think that's all it would have done, because there were structural issues with that house. I think there are other houses in town that you're right, I think probably could have been saved. But those 2 situations, I think, are a little bit unique. I just want to go through, as far as voting, if this was accepted, whenever, how long would the town have to wait to vote? 2 questions. To vote a surcharge, to raise the charge, if the town was so inclined. And what is it, 5 years before town can revoke it?
So to get,
Vote to
to get it
revoke
on, it's a ballot referendum to get it on, right, adopted. It's also a ballot referendum to adjust the surcharge or the exemptions, and that can happen as soon as you trigger a town meeting question to change and then get to the ballot question, ballot timing as well. So you could go through the cycle immediately if you wanted to. I can't imagine why any town would do that so quickly. But in terms of the revocation of it, there is a requirement that you have to have CPA on the books for 5 years before you can revoke it, if you were to do that. But again, I would say 176 communities have adopted it, 0 have sought or even approved revocation. But if I very quickly may say, in terms of any properties, right, if we look and say, how can we raise the monies for CPA? CPA monies can be bonded because it's projectable, right? So that's another opportunity. If you don't have the monies now, you can bond it. So that would have been an opportunity as well.
Okay. I think, from what I've heard from some people, they're concerned, there is concern that, I don't think you're doing this. I'm just gonna tell you what I heard.
Okay.
That this is like, the 1% is like get your foot in the door, and then eventually the town will raise it up. So what starts out as one thing, which, I mean, let's face it, you can look at any fee, it's what happens. So it's not that it would be unique to this, but there's concern, people that you start off at this number, and in a couple of years, you're gonna be at another number. And there doesn't seem to be anything in the statute that I saw that stops that. Once you accept it, you can raise it whenever you want, as you said.
You have to go to the ballot question, though.
Yes, you have to go to a
Yeah.
ballot question. I know that makes it a
Yeah.
little more difficult, but you
Yeah.
can do it.
Yeah.
And I guess my last question, well, there's a couple of things. The match from the state is not guaranteed, correct?
That is correct. It is, you're guaranteed to be eligible.
You're guaranteed to be eligible.
Yes,
And when it started, and there were only a few communities that were getting 100% match.
that is correct.
And it was great, because I remember back then looking into it, and I said, wow, it's a good deal. Now that there's 172, there's not the funding, and even for, certainly not 100% match. I know last year there was 23%, but that number could fluctuate, and I think it's a positive that there's some money from the state, but we don't know what that's going to be from year to year, correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
My last question is, when the committee is formed, if this is approved at the ballot, who is the appointing authority? I understand that there's 4 or 5 departments that, committees that have to have membership. Who is the appointing authority for the other 4? That's not clear to me, and it wasn't clear to me from the information I read on the state site.
Right.
Just curious.
With the 176 communities, they all have come up with some Rubik's Cube way of figuring out what they want to do for CPC. So every community.
Everybody's different.
Everyone's going to be different. So it really is how we write the bylaw. Now certainly, as a ballot committee, we were most interested in making sure this happens. So we would be drafting it and obviously circulating for feedback of how we should have the CPC formed and who appoints or who elects, right, et cetera. So,
Okay, now, let me just give you my thoughts.
sure.
Mrs. Cassavant couldn't have said it better for me than what she just said. I agree with the CPA, and if we were in a different circumstance, I could be 100% behind this. I have no problem with the concept at all. But I will say what I know several of my fellow members have said. In my mind, the police station's a priority. And I'm not saying, I don't have a problem with going the petition route either, because I think it's an option open to you. And I think that I know there's a timing issue. So I understand why you would do it. I have no problem with that. But looking at all the other financial issues in town, and particularly looking at that police station, I can't support competing messages. And the police station is long, long overdue for, well, either a major renovation, which we know isn't realistic because we went through that before and that's the end of it. So whatever happens, it's going to be a lot of money. And I'm really concerned, as Mr. Kane is, that we're going to have two competing messages going out. We got people working in two different directions on the same ballot. And I know that for most people, it's not a lot of money. I understand that. $40 a year possibly for people on bags was not a real lot of money in the scheme of things. I didn't want to raise the bag fees, but we didn't have a choice because the contract changed. But I know the reaction that we had to that. And it was a pretty visceral reaction. And I'm just concerned that even though this does a lot of good, I can see the potential there. I'm concerned that people are going to say, don't raise my fees and go into the box, and no on both. That might not happen. That's my fear. I've seen it happen before here, so, and granted, there were two big ticket items, and they both got voted down. So I really appreciate what you're doing, and but I just can't look at this in isolation. Personally, I think there's a lot of good that can come out of it. But I would just say one thing in the end. Northborough buying the White Cliffs without having a plan, to me, was a good example of why, not why we shouldn't have CPA, why town shouldn't move ahead and do stuff like that, because that every year that sits there and every winter that it sits there, that building's going to decay. And they're going to have to put tons of money into that. And I fear of what's going to happen to it in the future. So I think planning is really important, and I'm not saying that a CPA committee wouldn't do that, but I just think it's an example of why not. I will say that buying open space, as we did, however we got the funding, was a good thing, and it worked out well. So I know there's good coming out of it too, but in closing, I really am conflicted, and I'm really sorry that I cannot come out and get behind this right now. I'm not gonna campaign against it, I'll tell you that. But my priority is the police station, because it's just got to be done. And we have the same priorities in terms of getting out the vote as CPA committee has. I mean, we understand why you're doing it. So if you want to bring a petition, and I know it's not hard to get, and it would surprise me if you don't have one right now. You know, I don't have a problem with it as Mrs. Cassidy has, does not. So I thank you for all your work, and I appreciate everything you did in getting the word out. I just think we've got two good things coming together at the same time, and I can only support one. And I did tell you, I was kind of surprised that we were doing the police station in November too, because I thought we were going to do it next May. But I think if we're on track to do it, we should keep that schedule. So in any event, if I'm assuming you're going to go ahead, so I wish you luck. And I'm sure we'll cross paths as we go along, but I just think the stars didn't align for me. So I just want to tell you that. So I don't know if anybody else on the board has anything to add, Mr. LeBeau?
Mr. Chairman, I know we've gone on for some time, but I have a question and a comment. To follow up on your line of questioning, or the question you asked a couple minutes ago about the trend and the history of the state funding. So we've established at one time it was 100%. We've established that most recently it was 23.9%. I'm sure you've done some research. What's the high? Well, the high's 100. What's the low? I mean, what's the trend been over these past years?
Well, I would just say that you really can't look at the past performance to predict future earnings. If you look at financial projections. with the increases in the Register of Deeds fees, they're projecting about 30% in the next few years, right, to go forward. You would have to imagine that, with more communities getting on board with this, that the state's not gonna just abandon this program, right? Because this is very popular. It's only gonna get more popular, right? So they'll find some way to do it. I mean, I have full faith in our federal government, our state house government to figure out how to make sure that trust fund doesn't just disappear, right? Because that's a lot of communities that bought into it for a very long time, and gaining a lot of benefit from it. So just like they did to rise up, to stand together, to say 176 signatures, to say, we need you, Baker Polito administration, to fix this problem, and they did. And I wouldn't be surprised if another administration in the future does the same. So whether it be 30%, even 1%, 1% is a good discount, right? And I'm not saying that's a forecast, but any discount is better than paying full price.
So, understanding that the funding mechanism has changed, I still would like to know, how low has it gone?
It got low, I believe, in the upper teens. That was a critical mass. And that's what pushed the communities to say, hey, we need to fix this. And so with enough push on it, it actually got up to 23.9 last year because of an influx in cash to prop up the trust fund. It would have been in the 14s, I think, upper teens,
So
but it wasn't.
I confess, even yesterday or today, we heard the chairman of Senate Ways and Means talk about some, out of the blue, some concern about revenue for the state because of what's going on with the economic situation right now. Legislatures in the past have found pockets of money and reappropriated them for other uses. So I don't consider necessarily any kind of line in the sand for what CPA is going to provide to be real, because I do think with the legislative action in the right or wrong circumstances, depending on how you look at it, that could go away. So I think the community needs to think about what does the community want to do, understanding the fact that there may be extra money, but also understanding the fact that that's completely out of the control of the community. Could be 100%, that was where it was a long, long time ago. Nobody sees that in the near future. We're talking in the 20s or 30s, or potentially less, because as you mentioned, one town more than half of the cities and towns in Massachusetts have gone in. So, I want to call that out, that number is not subject to the town of Shrewsbury's determination of what that number is going to be. So what we can count on, if this passes, would be the 1% less the various exemptions. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, most of the members of the board gave an opinion. I initially asked a question. I never really gave an opinion. I think it's appropriate that I do. I'm not concerned about the timing with Beale and the police station. My position on this has been fairly clear for several years. It's several, I've made my opinion known publicly. We just had a conversation about it a couple of weeks ago. I've always been very reticent about increasing the footprint of the town. And though I certainly have, I think I've done that when I felt we absolutely had to and were compelled to. I feel this is highly discretionary. I am not at all denying that we could do wonderful things with it. The question to me is, do we decide that we want to extract $500,000 or more from the taxpayers of Shrewsbury for us to do what we think is right and good, as opposed to what they might think is right and good to do with their money? So that's a basic philosophical question that I'm not sure I'm ever going to be convinced of differently. As I mentioned, I don't discount all the wonderful things that could happen, but I'm also very fond of the old-fashioned method of walking into town meeting and saying, hey, folks, this is what we want to do. This is how much it's going to cost. What do you think? And that's my preference for funding any kind of project, rather than having this for lack of a better word, an automatic program that's pulling in money every year. And as you mentioned, I at one time said this was permanent. A member of your committee took me to task and said, no, it's not permanent because it can be changed in 5 years. However, I mean, you've honestly told us, no one has ever changed it. So with that, I am unwilling to vote to place this on the warrant.
Any closing words?
Yes, so in terms of, I mean, I've heard remarks about that it's not specificity about the project request, that it's just this money, slush fund of money coming in. You know, to a tax, I think to a general taxpayer, we'll say the whole municipal budget is a open checkbook to the town to figure out what they need to do with it, right? You pay your 12.47, you know, a year per thousand from your, you know, from your taxes, and it goes into a pot, and the town decides what to do with it. Now, of course, as we're all in this room and we all know the details, the gritty details about the budgets and where the monies go, the general public does not ever care to see or want to know all the specificity about all those projects and how they get funded, whether it be $800,000 or $1 million deficit in one department or how much goes to the Parks and Rec. They don't care about all that. They care about, am I getting my value for my buck? Is the town providing the services that I've asked for? If you take care of the basics, that's some folks just care about that, right? They just care about those basics. But if you look at master plans, housing production plans, surveys, all those things are what the community at large has been speaking about, what they also want, in addition to the typical town services, education, fire, and police, and infrastructure. So if we're not meeting any of the things they've been asking for in this slide here, then we're also leaving them behind. So it doesn't matter which pocket it's coming from, it's about how do we get these things done in any fashion. In terms of the surcharges, I totally understand, but you know, CPA has been around since 2000. It's already gone through booms and busts, right, with the recession in 2008, and all the surge in the stock market most recently, and looks like we're heading back into another downward fall there. But I believe the CPA will still be there in some fashion, and like I mentioned earlier, I believe that 80% above zero is a good discount on monies coming in.
I will.
Thank you.
I'm going to take you to task on what you just said about the public not caring about the pots. I don't think that's true. We hear that when the school budget's affected. We hear that when other budgets are affected. We hear that at town meeting. People vote for town meeting members to vote on their budget. So I think people do care, and I think I've been on the board long enough to know that a lot of people follow where we're spending our money, and some people are happy about it, and some people aren't. So I don't think it's fair to say that people pay their taxes and they're not that concerned where it goes. People want their needs met. And I think one of the things that this town has always done, and maybe things will change, but we've always voted for needs to have, not nice to have. And when things were tough, the nice to have for sure weren't even on the table. This, you could make an argument as a need to have, but some people could see it as a nice to have. But in any event, people want to make sure that their services are being met. And just to say that they'll pay their tax and just and not be so concerned about where it goes, I really think is off the mark. And I won't go in it, but I could debate you on those last three things of how much of the community actually had gotten behind those. I can tell you in the housing protection plan, that was done by the planning department, and we didn't even know that was coming in that report. So I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but I don't think you should dismiss that people pay their taxes and want to know that it's being spent wisely, and that was the impression you just gave me.
Okay, so, sorry, I didn't mean to give that impression. It was just there are some folks that aren't tuned in, and there are folks that are highly tuned in, right? You have every shade of gray, right? town meeting members are obviously the most in tuned members of the board and other commissions, et cetera, highly tuned into what's happening in the pulse of what's in the budget, et cetera. But I just made the comment that generically, when you're paying your taxes, every single property owner is paying the tax bill. It's going into a pot, right? And they're relying on others, as yourselves, to figure out where that money should be allocated. And so what I'm just saying here, overall, that it's not, those folks are not gonna say, well, this part of the bill is going to a pot that is managed by the town, by the board, and this part of the money is going through CPC. I don't think that is fair to say it's the open checkbook, if you will.
No, I didn't say that, and I agree with you. Town meeting has the final say on everything.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to remember that. In any event, going over an hour, I think we all understand where
Yep.
we all are. I wish you good luck, and we'll see where both of these projects go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your respectful discussion, too. I think we had a good dialogue. Okay. Is anybody here from On Wheels, Inc.? Let's just give them a chance to clear out. Good evening.
Good evening.
You were like 5 or 10 minutes late, so what it cost you? It cost you like an hour. Okay, so are you Maxim Soroka?
Maxim, yeah.
Okay. And you want a Class 2 license at 421 Boston Turnpike?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the business. Tell us a little bit about your experience in the used car business. And
Yes,
we'll open it up to questions from members of the board.
Okay, sounds good. I've been in this business for about 4 years now, and I used to work as a salesman, and now I decided to go and work by myself and open a business. And
Can you talk a little louder, because I have a little
Sure.
trouble hearing, and this room is not good for sound.
I've been in business for about 4 years now.
In the car business?
In car business, I worked as a salesman, and now I decided to go by myself and open a business. And I found this location in Shrewsbury, and we already got a special permit last month, and now we applied for the Class 2 license, and that special location is located at 421 Boston Turnpike, and the license is for 35 vehicles. And pretty much it.
Okay, how many employees will you have?
Right now, it's just me and my co-partner.
Okay. Where are you going to do your repairs? Where are you going to have your repairs done?
It's pretty much local. There is two.
Not behind a building like the last
No.
guy did?
No, I'm not a mechanic. I'm a salesman. So
All right.
I have no idea how to fix cars.
Okay, but you do have a place where you can take people that could
Yes,
take the
definitely.
cars to get serviced?
Definitely, yes.
Okay.
A few body shops and a few mechanical shops, and a few of them is located here in Shrewsbury, and a few of them located in Waltham and Maynard. So pretty much around the Shrewsbury.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? No?
I just have one quick question.
Yes, Ms. Tamiya?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. You set up the entity in 2018. Have you ever
Yes.
done any other type of business with this entity, or is?
It was all related with cars, pretty much. And I opened the company before because I was looking for the place, and it took me a little bit longer than I expected. And finally, I found the place in 2020. Actually, in 2019, but we signed the paperwork in 2020, January 1st, yeah.
So have you ever sold cars as this company before? This is the first?
This is the first.
All right, thank you.
Anybody have? Yeah? Okay, there was somebody.
She left.
She left. Okay, well, any other questions, members of the board? Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to be heard on this? Okay. I would encourage you to talk to, it sounded like the neighbor immediately behind you because she had some concerns apparently about the previous owner and what was happening with the bushes along her property.
Right.
Okay. You aware of that?
Not really.
Okay, all right. Well, you might want to talk to her.
Okay.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to close the hearing?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, what would the board like to do?
Motion approved.
Second.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? So subject, would you make that motion subject to the restrictions that are on the ZBA decision of, what was it, Alex, do you know?
Of the appropriate date?
Appropriate date,
Sure.
in February,
So
I
moved.
think? Okay. Okay, so who seconded?
Second.
Okay. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. There you go, you're all set.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next, we have our continued public hearing with Keith Lindum, proposed manager of 81 Clinton Pub LLC, DBA Billy's Pub, for an all-alcoholic license and entertainment license. Is Mr. Lindum here?
No, he's not, and I was going to ask for
Oh.
a continuance.
Oh, dear.
All right, I don't know what the board's feelings are on that, so,
But I'd also like to give this
well,
paper
wait a
and
minute.
ask a question.
Wait. Okay, I'll run the meeting, you take care of that, okay?
Okay.
All right, so we don't have the applicant here.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a report of the progress made to date?
Wait, yes, actually, I have a memo that Ms. Martinez gave to us. But without, well, let me tell you where we are. We have a signed lease. The electric bill was paid. My understanding that discussion with the fire department, that the applicant is not going to be seeking the entertainment license because of the stuff they'd have to do to meet the requirements of that. They're at least not going to do it at this time. We do have an issue with the taxes, and I'll let you respond to that in a minute. First payment was due March 1st, and it hasn't been made. We have the issue of the zoning violation, which I'll let you speak about, which really isn't germane to this hearing, but
Thank you.
I'm going to let you address it anyways because we brought it up. We have water and sewer bill that's in arrears. And as of Friday, the building permit has not been applied for. They don't have a certificate of inspection, so that alone is enough to say no license.
Where are we with other life safety permits?
Fire department, from my understanding, is okay. There's an issue currently with the natural gas. There was an issue with some appliances leaking, so gas was shut off to the appliances. But the gas is still turned on for heat, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll let you briefly talk to the.
It'll take time. You guys already had a lot of time.
No, I'll let you briefly talk to the issue of the zoning violation, because I
Right.
think we should clear that up.
No,
but-
because we're not in any zoning violation. Here is a copy of the permits for Sarah's Catering, 2019 and 2020.
Okay. Okay. Let me tell you how this works. The building inspector has jurisdiction, the sole jurisdiction over zoning and zoning violations. Let me finish. It doesn't make any difference what anybody else says. We've gone through this recently with other people who looked at assessors cards and thought that the property they had was an allowed use, and it's not. So I understand that you got these and thought that, in good faith, that these, that this
Shouldn't
gate,
have issued them.
let me finish. It is not their job to check the zoning. It's their job to see if what they're in charge of meets their requirements. So this issue that you have with the zoning is with the building inspector's department. It really has nothing to do with us. It would have something
I
to
know
do with
that.
us. It would have something to do with us if the business was going on in a way that it wasn't supposed to, and it affected the license. This issue is, you know, the only reason I'm so familiar with it is it came up in other instances that had nothing to do with you. That the building inspector has the zoning authority, and it doesn't make any difference who else in this building gives them a license. It's up to the building inspector. So you're gonna have to deal with them, okay, as far as that's concerned. It's
Well,
not,
I
it's
talked
not,
to the building inspector that now comes in to do the inspection, and he's all set for the permit, but he said because of the zoning, he can't give me the permit.
did you pull a building permit to
Yes, we
make the
did.
corrections you did?
And we did it under structural, we did it under, controlled construction.
I thought you said they didn't pull a building permit.
They did pull a building permit, however, the building permit was not issued because of the zoning violation with the catering business. in the
They
basement.
applied for the permit.
That is correct.
They weren't issued a building
That
permit.
is correct.
So we're still in that situation.
That is correct.
So
It's
they-
ready to be signed.
So you don't, Mr. Duggan, so we don't have a valid certificate of inspection?
That is correct. We do not have a valid certificate of
Okay,
inspection.
so, tell me what happened.
Okay, the building's under construction control, so that means, obviously, you know what that means. An engineer, architect has to stamp and drawings.
Right.
And for February 11th, we came before you, and simply, we didn't have the certificate of occupancy. So we continued it to the 25th. Then the architect Thaddeus that we hired wasn't able to get this stamped drawing and application for the permit submitted until the 23rd or 22nd of February.
Sure.
So that didn't give enough time for the building department to review what was submitted for the application for the permit. So we continued it again to this date. Now, I've been calling the building department every single day saying where the inspection, because I spent close to $25,000 in that building, plus I paid the $23,000 in taxes. It's starting to get heavy. And what I did was, Mike called me on Friday, he says, Joe, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but you got a zoning violation. How do I have a zoning violation? We have a permit. They don't sell out of Billy's, they're a private entity. All they're doing is renting the kitchen. They're using the kitchen utilities. That's it. You can't go into Billy's and buy from Sarah's Catering.
Doesn't make any difference. It's a zoning issue.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman? How does one get out of this zoning question?
Go to get a special permit or a variance.
So it's a ZBA question.
Well, if the building inspector says it's in violation and they want to continue working, then they have to go to the zoning board of appeals.
The path out is to the ZBA. We don't need a town meeting action.
No. So,
And that's a business decision that these folks have to make, whether or not they go to the ZBA.
right.
But there is a path to solve this issue.
I will say this.
Thank you.
You folks represented to us that, in a letter, that they were.
Yeah, I stopped, I
Okay.
stopped them, and then
Wait a
they
minute.
sent a lawyer letter to me.
But after that, the police or the fire department went down there for a visit, and they were still working there, so,
They weren't working, they were taking things out of there.
We have a secondary kitchen that we operate out of, and our stuff is in the cooler in Billy's Pub.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to straighten all this out with the building inspector, because we have no control over it.
Yeah.
And the Board of Health really has no control over it. And I know it's unfortunate that this stuff happens, but it's just different jurisdictions, and the one hand is not required by law to talk to the other.
If I may, we worked in a few other towns before, and primarily in Framingham, and we've worked in many different locations, shared kitchens, some that we've been doing simply because it's a catering business. And we've never been directed to speak with the zoning boards in any of the towns or We've never been reached out by any of the zoning boards, so it's just something that we wouldn't have known. And
That's okay.
it just makes it a little bit difficult. And
If
this-
you could have been in zones in the other towns that what you were doing was allowed. I do know that you're not allowed to be using the same facilities as the restaurant when the restaurant's using them. I do know that. And that, I didn't say you were. That's a Board of Health thing. But you really have to go, in the zone that they're in, if you want to do that, you have to go to the zoning Board of Appeals. Doesn't mean they'll say no. They could say no, they could say yes, they could say yes with conditions, you don't know, but you have to go to them. So that really is that issue. We're done here with that because it's not us.
Yeah.
I just want to bring to your attention that the Board of Health permitted this licensing based on our hours and their hours, and they don't coincide with.
Okay,
one
but you
another.
still have the other issue that there's a zoning doesn't allow what you want to do there. And your remedy is to go to the zoning Board of Appeals.
Which is no problem. I mean, there is a solution to every problem.
Right, and you have to go to the zoning Board of Appeals, and we can't deal with that. We can't deal with that because it's not us, okay?
What are,
No, there was,
No, you gotta go to the zoning Board of Appeals, okay? You file with the building inspector's office to the zoning Board of Appeals, and you have a hearing like this, you explain the situation, you tell them what you wanna do, and then they make a decision, okay?
okay?
Okay, so, that's all I can tell you about that. I guess, at this point, what does the board want to do about the license application of Billy's Pub?
Can you continue it again? Because I intend to drive into Boston tomorrow to go to the head building inspector in the state.
It doesn't make, you can go to the head building inspector in the state. We have to deal with what the law says we have to do. You can drive if you want. I shouldn't even be talking to you about this license because it's Mr. Latham who's the applicant. So, we can continue, or we can close the hearing and we can make a decision based on what we know. So, it's up to the board.
We still have open issues, though.
Yeah, we still have open.
My objective is to give the gentleman time for him to get in line with the zoning and with the life safety matters, such that he can get up and operating and pay all of his back taxes to us. If he doesn't pay all of those by December, then we don't reissue the license, just to be honest.
Yeah, but the life safeties are all done. There's over 20,000, 23.
Paid all your back taxes and everything?
No, we got an agreement that once we got open, we start paying each
That-
month,
that's in
but we
writing
can't
now?
get open.
Yeah, that,
Right, wonderful, great.
I feel, go ahead, I'm sorry.
The zoning issue is remedied by not having the catering business in there as well,
Right.
so.
So the zoning issue,
I understand that.
As far as Billy's Pub opening.
if they
want
could
to open-
demonstrate that the catering business wasn't open to the satisfaction of the building inspector,
Yeah.
then they could do that.
That's one path right there.
That's one thing. So that's something I have to deal with him. I feel, I'm trying to think of what I was saying. With the applicant not being here, I feel very reluctant to take action on this because they have no way to respond at this point, even though this is dragging on. So my recommendation would be that we continue it till the next.
I agree,
I would
Mr.
agree
Chairman.
with that.
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
So you-
the only thing I want to say is, I want to act. I don't need progress reports.
Right.
I mean, this has been an epic story, and I'm getting ready for the end of the story. So when the applicant is prepared to come forward with the boxes checked for the board to act on be able to act on an application, that's when I want to hear from them.
Right.
I understand we have to continue to a date certain, so I'm fine with that. But if they are not ready, I just want the board to continue it. I
Right.
don't want to have any conversation. till we're
Continue
ready-
it because we-
Till we're ready to do it.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to continue this hearing until March 24th at what time? 7:20. Okay, okay? Everybody receive it?
Yes.
Okay. Hearing is continued. Make sure he's here.
I gotta go pick him up. He's broke down, he's actually broke down up on 495 at 93.
Yeah, lucky
Towed
him.
to a gas station.
All right.
I have to go get
And you
him.
folks, talk to the building inspector and work it out, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Hey, just a little bit of history. This is Sarah's Catering, you know Tom Brady? They do all the catering for Tom Brady's best buddies.
No, they're not
Like
gonna
Mark
be
Wahlberg.
doing out of that building unless they get unless they
we
get
have a
permission
second-
from the zoning board.
No,
All
You
right.
know, all I did was rent the kitchen and the equipment for X amount of dollars for rent every month. Jeez, like, I can't even catch a break.
All right. Okay, moving on. Mr. Mizuka, do you want to take us through the draft of the town meeting warrant? Anybody have any questions? Make a presentation?
Yeah, I have just some slides that kind of characterize the articles that are on the draft warrant for your consideration this evening. The board will be asking the board to sign the final warrant at your meeting on March 24th, so. Thank you.
Yes, we got 2 weeks.
So, in summary, we have 41 articles for your consideration that have been drafted. And I put them into 4 different buckets just to kind of streamline our conversation this evening, but I'm more than willing to answer any questions that you have or go into in-depth on any of the articles. We, of course, don't have all the financial details as we're early in the budget process. We have things, as fleshed out as much as we can, but there are still some open spots in some of the capital improvement plans and some of the utilities. And obviously, the budget itself is still a work in progress. So 25 of the articles are related to appropriations, financial administration, and borrowings. There's 7 amendments to bylaws, 6 just general miscellaneous uncategorized, and 3 are related to public ways and land matters. With regards to the appropriation request and financial administration, I've included subject matters for all the articles that are proposed. So the first is a standing article that we always utilize to pay the out-of-pocket costs associated with retired and disabled public safety officers, police, and firefighters. To make an appropriation for Chapter 90 based upon the state amount that's allocated to us. We have a placeholder right now for the prior year bills. There are currently none known at this time, but this is something that we always have just in case it does take town meeting action. We have an article for current fiscal year budget transfers. None are known at this time, but as things are evolving throughout this fiscal year, there may be necessarily changes made in between departments or in between personnel and expenses within a particular department, and we'd use this article to handle those movements. For the fiscal year 21 operating budget, fiscal year 21 capital improvement plan. And then we have solid waste operations. We have a sewer system operations and the sewer system capital improvements, water system operations, and water system capital improvements. We have 2 different articles, one that would propose the acquisition of 268 North Quinsigamon Avenue and 274 North Quinsigamon Avenue for the purposes of wellhead protection acquisition to preserve land around our drinking water wells associated with our Lambert field. We have an article proposed the operations of stormwater and capital improvements for stormwater. We have a standing article to fund the cable television access enterprise. There's a borrowing authorization request for the enhancement of the electric and cable broadband improvement project. This is the project that Mr. Hale laid out to you at the meeting last 2 weeks ago. We have the standing article for the sale of cemetery lots. We have a proposal to fund counseling and education services through Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. We have a proposed funding request for the Lake Quinsigamon watershed quality initiatives. We have a proposal to increase funding levels within the general stabilization account, set spending limits on revolving accounts, and 2 different articles to reduce the general tax levy, one with a transfer from the Selco Light aspect and one using free cash. So those are the 25 articles related to appropriations or general financial administration. Any questions on those?
No, thank you.
7 bylaw amendments. There are 5 that are zoning related. 4 of those are related to the town center district that is being proposed, and 1 is related to marijuana cultivation facilities district expansion and the districts with their permissible use in. There's a general bylaw proposed for the regulation, to regulate donation containers. And there are miscellaneous amendments that need to be made to the personnel bylaw that are associated with the changes that were made at the annual town meeting in 2019, mainly enable performance-based compensation changes rather than longevity-based changes and certain other classification language that was missed with the prior amendment. The 6 uncategorized projects include a standing article to hear reports of town officers and committees, to choose the trustees of the Wright and Harlow Trust, and an article to establish a police station and municipal campus building committee. This building committee would be charged with overseeing the finalization of the design for any improvements that are going to be made to the police station or the town hall and senior center, and lead the project through early phase of schematic design and into a funding request for the fall town meeting, and potentially a ballot request for a borrowing authorization on the November election. There's a request to establish a way to receive reimbursement for foster care students that the school has expenses for. There's a potential article for the increase in the allowance of certain pensioners, mainly disabled police officers. And there's an article to accept the Mass General Law, Chapter 148, Section 26.8, to require sprinklers in boarding houses.
How many boarding houses do we have, Mr. Manager?
I don't know if I know the number.
We don't know the exact number, but we are coming across them
Really?
on various cases.
Thank you very much.
We will get that for you, though. Final 3 articles. 1 is for the disposal of the property at 1 through 7 Maple Avenue, which is the Beal Early Childhood Center. The second article is to potentially acquire easement proximate to Lake Street and Hialeah Drive to enable finalization of sidewalk construction related to the Beal project, and also to lay out and make public 2 ways, a portion of Nelson Point Road and all of Point Road. So that was a quick walk through 41 articles. This again is just the draft this is just the draft, and we will continue to work on the finalization of these. We have provided the board with a full draft of each one of those articles for you this evening, and look forward to hearing any comments. And of course, after the warrant is signed, during that process, if you have any specific questions, we can answer them, and then we'll move into the real details in your April meetings on what the funding levels are and get the board's thoughts on approving or recommending them.
Okay, thank you. Question?
I really like the way you presented this.
Thank you.
I like the way it's categorized, so you can kind of think of things in groups. I have one question. We have been talking a lot about strategic planning. And for reasons that no one should question, I subscribe to town updates from Westboro. And I noticed that they are doing a strategic plan where they're using a consultant, and it's a collaborative effort between town staff and the Board of Selectmen, and they're doing visioning. And today, ironically, as I pulled in here, I got a survey on town services, operations, and staffing, which I didn't take it, but I did go through it. And it was just interesting, so I was wondering how they went about securing funding. Like, what would something like that look like if we were to think about doing something like that? And what would be the timeline for securing funding for something like that?
Okay. I mean, we can certainly do the research necessary to be able to move forward with an article, to have someone enable it, or facilitate a strategic planning process. I think with regards to the timeline, you're looking at, if you don't have the opportunity to do it at this spring, we're going to kind of lose a year potentially if it wouldn't come back until the next spring or even the fall. Would certainly delay it outside of a timeline to be able to well, you're just going to lose time, right? So if you lose another 6 or 8 months, it could mean another whole fiscal year that you're not planning for if that is the desire. So I'm certainly I believe Westboro is using Novak Consulting.
They're using
Group.
Novak Consulting Group. So I
that
was
would
just
be an easy phone
poking
call.
around, kind of looking to see what they were doing, and it just sounded a lot like things that we've been talking about, and where we just went through this whole weekend, couple weekends of finance committee meetings, and we're looking at having discussions about shortfalls in the school committee, or the school department's budget, the way that they're sort of reaching out to residents on different aspects of the community to sort of see where people's priorities lie. I just found that to be really interesting. Plus, I really like surveys, so I was interested in looking through and seeing what kinds of questions they were asking. And they were just asking things like, do you think the staffing levels are adequate? Are your, if you call in and, have a request or a complaint or a concern, do you get an answer within an acceptable amount of time? It was just, I thought, very basic, but I think also an interesting way of surveying the community and sort of seeing their thoughts on the operations and the progress that we're making or maybe not making in certain areas.
We have done that in the past. I actually came across the one that we did when Mr. Magato was here. I can send you a copy of it.
Do you know when it was?
It's dated, but it was a few years ago. I don't know if it was as detailed as the Westboro, and I haven't seen it, but I think in broad discussions, perhaps, we talked about engaging the community, but I think we'd be rushed to try to get it on this town meeting, because I think we need background information that you're working on with the projections and stuff like that. I think it's worth looking into, but I personally, I don't want to rush to get it on this town meeting, because I just don't think there's enough time to really get it all done correctly.
Well, I was just asking for just a general, like, what would it take and what would the timeline look like if we needed to, if we wanted to go in that direction? Whether it's this town meeting or it would be a fall town meeting, just saw the information, thought it was interesting.
It'd be good. I'd take a look at it myself.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Just to follow up on that, I'd ask that we'd consider putting on this May, at least the research that I've done, or talk about a little more about possibly funding part of strategic planning. It seems that every successful strategic plan does involve some appropriation for an outside consultant as part of the engagement to the community. That seems to be universal across the board. And so I think that's, given, I think, the importance, seeing where we are after the last couple Saturdays and the Thursday before that on where we are as a community. And as we're going through the projection work, I think it's something that we'd consider now. It will take a long time. I think it's part of a strategic plan, looking at 12 months or 18 months. So to wait another year would be a long period of time.
I wasn't suggesting waiting another year. I think maybe in the fall. But I think right now we're rushing it. We've got a month and a half. I think it's good to collect the information. I think it's nice to know. Let's see what they did. Because, but I think people need to have something to react to, as opposed to just broad open-ended questions. I know they're not open-ended questions, but what I mean is with nothing to focus specifically on, like a potential budget document or the projections out of where we're going to go. Certainly worth looking at, but I think, I personally, I think it's rushed. I don't know what anybody else thinks. But.
May I just ask one question without belaboring it? Perhaps we should have a workshop and talk about this. But I would think that at the end of any discussion of initiating a strategic plan, you should have, in my opinion, at least 3 objectives. Because saying you have a strategic plan is wonderful, but what's the objective of that?
Right.
Ultimately, we have, I believe, a very well-run town, a fantastic school system, an anemic revenue cycle that doesn't fund our annual needs. I don't need to sit around with a consultant to know that. So that's where we are. The question is, how do you go about sustaining the effort to run the town we have? Or are people willing to pay the money to have that sustaining? Are they in a position to pay that? So if we're going to do this, I just hope we set aside enough time, with or without a facilitator. And I would just ask that we recognize what I think is the importance, maybe I'm wrong, of having 3 to 5 objectives to the entire effort. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. When you mentioned workshop, because we're going to try to schedule one, hopefully in the next month.
That'd be great.
Okay, anything else? Okay. Item 9 is review and adopt the FY21 health insurance rates for active employees. I have an appearance of a conflict on this, so I'm going to have to recuse myself, so I'll go fill this up. Mr. Cassavant?
What you covered.
All for you? Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Mizikar, if you could take us through any information related to the FY21 health insurance rates for active employees.
I will tell you that I have some rather good news in comparison to prior years with regards to the rates for health insurance. The West Suburban Health Group Board has recommended, and as has the Shrewsbury Insurance Advisory Committee earlier today, recommended the rates for the various plans, which have a composite increase of 5.2%. And that is a direct reflection of the performance of all the plans that are offered through the West Suburban Health Group, which Shrewsbury employees are able to take advantage of. The performance of those plans are, really the best that we've seen over the last 5 to 8 years. And I'm happy to report that the Fallon plans, which are where most of the town of Shrewsbury employees, or the plans that most of the town of Shrewsbury employees elect, are coming in at 4.8%. So it's a very, very positive impact on our budget. We use a composite number of 7.4%. And when you're dealing with a line item that's, now approaching $13 million, a couple percentage points means a lot of dollars that we'll be able to reallocate and support some of those challenges that we're facing within the budget. So just one final note, prior to your vote, the high deductible plans or the HSA qualified plans are performing very well for the West Suburban Health Group. The town of Shrewsbury has about 10% of our employees that participate in those. The West Suburban Health Group as a whole has 30% of the employees, and those plans are trending closer to 75% of premium to claims ratio. So that's very healthy. 100% would mean your premiums are covering all the claims that have come in, and they're at 75%, so they're exceeding it. So this year could very well be the year that the West Suburban Health Group gets back within its fund balance policy. And because of that good performance, and we're able to see more stable, low rate increases year over year from here. So there's no proposed towns to leave the group. Everyone sees the value and realizes the good financial situation that we're in. So I would seek your approval in setting the rates as laid out in the drive and handout to you this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Perfect timing.
Watching on TV. Okay, item 10 is to review and act on the road race request from Dave Husaki, I think, Director of Science and Engineering at Shrewsbury High School, for the 5K Color Splash on April 11th. Do you have a motion?
Move approval with the police department's approval to the route.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Item 11 is to review and act on the one-day alcohol license of Lynn Cronin, St. John's High School, for the St. John's Annual Gala on Saturday, April 4th, from 1 p.m. to 12 a.m.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. Item 12 is to review and act on a one-day all-alcohol request of Joe Yosef, St. Mary's Orthodox Church, 1 Industrial Drive, for an Easter celebration on Saturday, March 21st, from 5 p.m. to 12 a.m.
Move approval.
Second.
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 Okay, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 13 is to review and act on the Selco recommendation for one LED streetlight with a pole to be installed at 22 Greenbrier Drive, as shown on the plan dated March 4th, 2020. That letter also included that they were going to repair a light at 7 Ridge Road as a result of that request. And they're requesting on Lillian Terrace at Jordan Road, a protective cover over the light. I don't know, do we need to vote on that, or they just,
That means?
what's the issue? It's further in their letter. We don't need to
You don't need to
vote.
vote, it's just for informational.
Oh, okay.
What is a protective light?
They put a cover over the light. They want a protective cover over the light. I might have said it wrong.
Okay, I just wasn't sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so, a motion to approve the light at 22 Greenbrier.
So,
Second.
Okay, further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay. Item 14, do we need an FY '21 budget discussion? After we
I
sat
just feel like
through,
didn't we just discuss it for a Thursday and 2
we're
Saturdays?
just carrying that in case we need.
Yeah,
something.
just carrying it, but, I mean, I think, given the challenges that have been identified and some recent changes, like with the health insurance, it'd be great to have a workshop with the board to kind of work things through.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, and I'll beat this dead horse, I promised the manager the final time, but I would really like to have a full and complete explanation, because I'm simply missing something, on the PERAC recommendation for our budget number to the retirement fund versus the rather substantial difference that is in our budget that is rather higher, and I would say much higher, as I recall. So I would appreciate if we're gonna have one of these, that we have a full explanation on that. It strikes me as being not only belts and suspenders, but perhaps duct tape and whatever else. And we have starved the operating budget for years in some cases because we were hell-bent on full funding consistent with PERAC and other recommendations. I feel as though this is an overreach, I gotta be honest with you, from whoever's behind recommending this, and I love that gentleman, he gives great presentations. But I feel like this is a year where it's an overreach. So I would just like, by the way, if we overreach and people who wanna overreach, people can overreach. I, for one, don't wanna overreach, I'm very comfortable with the PERAC number. So I would simply like that included on any future workshop agenda, Mr. Chairman.
You can do that. I think we did the right thing aggressively trying to fund.
I agree with
the
you.
outstanding obligation.
And here we are, and I'm reaching for the life preserver, and someone's grabbing it from me. That's how I'm feeling with this year. So I'm just
I
asking
hear
that we
what
review
you're
that.
saying, but if the market continues its up and downs, we might have a different situation in a year, but we should add it to the
Again, I just want to have
discussion.
it fully discussed. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, are we gonna need an executive session, another executive session this evening? We're gonna have to recon, okay.
Good.
All right, let's do the,
Just, what's the you're passing over item 15?
You too, thanks.
oh, sorry.
Which you-
I'm
which
jumping
you
back
are,
and forth
but-
between two sheets.
We do not need to take any.
I'm sorry, item 15, I think is mute at this point. We don't have to deal with it, correct? We're not doing
Great.
anything
Yeah,
with it.
I just wanted to note that.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. I have a different version of the agenda I got fixed up. Okay, item 16 is a letter dated February 21st from Angela Snell, Superintendent of Public Facilities and Parks, to Sheriff Evangelitis regarding community service work project request for cemetery work, so noted. Item 17 is a letter dated February 26th from Paul Schwab, Chair of the Historical Commission, regarding support for the Community Preservation Act. Item 18 is an email dated February 23rd from Ann Lally, 56 Brook Street, regarding an issue at 56 Brook Street. We actually discussed this at the last meeting. This letter came in late, and we'll have a response for her shortly, right? Mr. Mitzka?
Yes, I'm working on it.
Okay. Item 19 is an email from Naomi Halpern, of 131 Stony Hill Road regarding fluoridated water. Item 21 is an email dated March 1st from Brian Moss, 16 Ruthin Circle, again regarding issue of fluoridated water and who has oversight of that. And item 24 is an email dated March 3rd from Brian Moss requesting the Board of Selectmen to provide evidence providing or proving that swallowing fluoride is safe for pregnant women. We've had these and similar letters on our correspondence for a while. I guess my question is the board's position, has it changed?
My position has not changed.
Okay.
Oh, no, that's mine.
Then we're just gonna leave it as is then?
I mean, I would like clarity around just the process of who is responsible, whether it's the Board of Health or the Board of Selectmen, because I just see this as going back and
Responsible for
forth. Water fluoridation and making those decisions. I
People
see it
don't-
as the Board of Health.
May I just offer a simple item?
Yeah.
Motion to strike the funding at town meeting, kills it, bang, done. If you're against fluoride, cut the money out that funds fluoride.
But I'm not sure
Actually, it's more
that's how
complicated
it
than that.
works.
If you don't
However-
buy it, how is it more complicated than if you don't buy
Because the
it?
Board of Health has jurisdiction over it, but I don't think right now is the time to get into that discussion.
I thought town meeting approved appropriations, I'm
They
sorry.
approve the appropriations, but there's other issues with the jurisdiction of the Board of Health. So, okay, so we're just going to leave our position at this point as it is, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Item 20 is an email dated February 25th from Ivan Quagala, Regional Environmental Health Specialist, regarding a violation of the polystyrene bylaw. Gave a notice of violation to the Tandar Kebab and Tandar Grill, and explained to them how to come into compliance, so noted. Item 22 is an email dated March 2nd from Sandra Frick, School Committee, regarding the FY21 School Department budget discussion on March 4th. Believe we covered that again at the hearing on Saturday. Item 23 is an email dated March 2nd from Mark Polini and Manny Gomes, Shrewsbury Girls Softball, 5 Greenleaf Farm Circles. Asking that if the ball field at Beal is removed as a result of the Beal renovation, that money be found to relocate that field. Item 25 is an email dated March 5th from Sandra Frick of the School Committee regarding the FY21 cost reduction memo to the School Committee on March 4th. Again, that was discussed at the budget hearing on Saturday. Item 26 is an email dated March 5th from Adam Young, 10 Park Street Place, regarding the FY21 Shrewsbury school budget, asking for more funding for the schools and willingness to pay more in taxes. So noted. Item 27 is an email dated March 6th from Andy Truman, Town Engineer, regarding Crescent Street sidewalks. We had a request back in the fall. They've looked at it, at extending the sidewalks on Crescent. It would cost $220,000. We don't have $220,000 right now for that, but at least there's a plan for it, and we have a budget number, so if we want to move ahead, we can. Okay, now,
Chairman, there seems to be either an order issue or a couple items.
I might be working off a different, what do you got?
So I have 3 items that, or 2 items that I did not hear you speak that have these 2.
Yes. No. This one I did.
Yep, no, these 2.
This one I did. What's
Yeah,
this one?
there's 2.
No, I know. I mentioned
Okay.
3 of them. What's the other one? This one?
Yep.
I thought I just did that. Adam Young, 10 Park Street Place, yeah. FY21 school budget.
Okay,
I did.
all right.
Okay, is there anything else to come before the board in open session?
No.
Then can I have a motion to convene into executive session? That's where I'm having a problem. to discuss deployment of security personnel and/or devices or strategies with respect thereto, per General Law, Chapter 30A, S21A4.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and not to reconvene in open session? Okay,
Yes.
amend that, okay. Okay, we need a roll call vote. Ms. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Kane?
Aye.
Mr. LeBeau?
Aye.
Ms. Samia?
Aye.
Ms. Powell? Aye. Okay, we're going to convene into executive session, not to reconvene in open session. Good evening.
Your toes.